Right now at 4:30 today, salvage crews are on the Potomac River as they work to remove the wreckage from last week's deadly mid-air collision. Officials say several bodies are still in the aircraft and will be given a dignified removal. About 30 minutes ago, officials said they hope to finish pulling the fuselage out today in the cockpit tomorrow. 67 people were killed last Wednesday night when an American Airlines plane and a military Black Hawk helicopter collided near Reagan National Airport. And those families grieve, including the several here in Charlotte. There's going to be some time for questions about the next legal steps they have possibly in receiving compensation and for their pain and suffering. Queen City News Chief Legal Analyst Khalif Rhodes is here joining me now. And also joining us via Zoom is aviation lawyer Justin Green. And Justin, you confirmed today that your firm, Kreindler, has talked with some of the victims' families about their legal next steps. But this process will take some time, maybe years, to materialize into something.
Yeah, that's right. And, we've been retained now by some families. And unfortunately, it's, very difficult right now to be talking about legal, claims when it's so fresh and the families are still in the grieving process. But the law is pretty clear. And I think the families ultimately will have, full rights under the law to make significant recoveries.
Justin, we know that the helicopter pilot was flying 100 feet over what was allowed. Would that factor alone be enough to file a claim on behalf of the victims under the Federal Tort Claims Act? I understand that to be successful in those types of claims, the negligent act has to arise from some specific mandatory statute, regulation, or policy.
Yeah, so you bring up a very good point. So under the rules that they were flying under, the pilots were supposed to stay below 200 feet. They also accepted the responsibility to remain visually clear of the CRJ jet, that the American Eagles jet. So they had essentially two requirements that right now it seems that they violated under the Federal Tort Claims Act that would make the U.S. government liable. And the process, you mentioned before that it might take a long time. Well, you can't just run out and file a lawsuit against the U.S. government. You first have to file an administrative claim, allow the government the opportunity to look at your claim, see if they are going to accept it and pay the families what you ask. And only after your claim has been denied or the government just sits on it for 6 months can you file a lawsuit. So the very soonest any lawsuit could possibly be filed would be 6 months from now, assuming someone ran out and filed a notice of claim today and it got denied tomorrow. But so it's going to be quite a while. And meanwhile, the families that I represent, they don't care so much about winning the case in court. What they really care about is identifying the risk factors that caused this accident and really trying to make it safer so someone else doesn't suffer the same fate. And that is going to take some time as well.
Yeah, and Justin, you talked about the process you were talking about and how you do a lawsuit like this against the government. Your firm has a history of these lawsuits, most notably the settlement reached with the families of the last major aviation disaster in America. That was the 2009 Buffalo plane crash involving Colgan Air. That's right.
Yeah, I was one of the lead lawyers in the Colgan Air case. That went to court. It was fought out, over several years. And there are just very complicated legal and factual issues involved in aviation cases. Here, going after the government is kind of a uniquely challenging because you won't get a jury. You're going to be arguing your case to a judge. And the administrative process that I mentioned before can be complicated. A lot of law firms don't kind of handle these types of cases.
You talked about the administrative process, and after the government either accepts or rejects your offer, how long does it take before you submit that claim? And then do you wait till after the NTSB's investigation is completed, or do you do that while in coordination with the NTSB? Elaborate a little bit on what that investigation process looks like.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a good. The National Transportation Safety Board is going to investigate this accident. Their investigation is going to take over a year. A year from now, maybe they would have a hearing, and after the hearing or at the hearing, issue what are known as probable cause determinations and contributory factors, the things that the NTSB determined caused the accident. In this case, there also may be Army investigations that will take place over a similar time. Well, there are two things. One is under federal law, the findings of the NTSB are not usable in court. I can't go into court and say, look, the NTSB says it's the helicopter pilot's fault or the airline's fault or the air traffic controller's fault, and therefore I win. The federal law says that those are not admissible, and the reason for that is they don't want the NTSB to get involved in litigation. They don't want the NTSB's goal is safety, and that's all the NTSB wants to do, and that's really their job. So we have to do our own investigation. I think that it's going to take months, probably before we've completed at least a preliminary investigation. But already we have experts on board. We've analyzed the communications. We analyzed the flight paths of the helicopter, the flight path of the CRJ jet. And so we've already gotten a pretty good head start on our investigation.
Justin, if your NTSB investigation isn't allowed in, is it just a normal negligence claim standard, duty, breach, causation, and damages? Is that what you're attempting to prove? Yeah,
so under the Federal Tort Claims Act, the government, so let's start with the going against the government. You have to, the government is actually immune from suit. Sovereign immunity protects the government, but the government has essentially waived some of its sovereign immunities when it passed the Federal Tort Claims Act. In the Federal Tort Claims Act, they basically say the U.S. is going to be liable in the same manner that a private individual would be liable under those circumstances. The government isn't going to be liable for certain things. For example, staffing at the tower, if it's determined that the staffing didn't violate any sort of requirement, but was something that they determined within the discretionary, within their discretion, that might not be something that we can go against the government. So the government claims are different and challenging, but here the perhaps the simplest claim would be the helicopter pilot was 100 feet too high, and that's a violation, and they would be liable. And then you'd have to prove the damages. So there's no punitive damages against the government under the Federal Tort Claims Act. And the question is what kind of compensatory damages, which are the non-economic losses, the grief, the loss of society, but also the economic losses, the loss of support, and sadly even the claims of the victims for what they went through on that horrible flight.
Justin,
Go ahead.
Justin, you flew military helicopters. You said you have another connection to this Black Hawk unit that was flying that day. So this is a personal case for you.
Yeah, my partner was an Army helicopter pilot and actually flew in that squadron. And every accident is personal, but having served in the military and being a commercial pilot and representing families for all these years, this is a particularly tragic case for me and obviously for all of the people involved.
Well, Justin Green, aviation lawyer with Kreindler and Kreindler, we certainly appreciate your time, taking the time out to talk with us today here in Charlotte. Thank you.
No, and God bless the families.